Welcome to the Be That Healing Girl podcast. And today we have a very, very special guest. Can't wait to introduce you to her. She is truly a statement of what it takes and what's possible for you when you actually heal your anxious attachment, when you do the things, you show up for yourself, and you can go from anxiously attached to secure. So I'm really excited to bring her on to the stage and have her share with you. And if you are enjoying this episode or any other episode, hitting the 5 stars means so, so much. It really is like a high five. Yes, I have somebody here today, but typically I'm just talking at the camera. So doing that takes 2 seconds and it means so, so much. And another little update is about a week away from going on my big experience. And just some insight is that I'm actually realizing that I'm going to be facing my deepest, darkest fear of abandonment, of being alone, of being unseen. I didn't know that's what I was going to be doing with this retreat, but that's what I'm doing. And so I'm really excited to share more updates, what's happening, and especially give you the lowdown when I get back. Because one thing that I love about being a coach, working with clients, is that I walk my freaking talk. All right. I walk my talk. And this retreat, while I knew what was going to happen, I didn't really know in my heart and understand that I was going to be fully facing a fear, because part of the retreat is going to be isolated, totally isolated in the wilderness. And it's also going to be silent. So it just feels really powerful. And I'll keep checking in closer as it gets here, because I don't feel nervous now, but I guarantee a couple days before I might feel a little different. So we'll just watch the whole journey. All right. With no further ado, welcome to the pod, Karuna.
Oh, nice to be here.
Yay. We're so glad you're here. Karuna, who are you? Tell us about you and what it's like to know you.
Well, I'm a twin. I have a fraternal twin. I always start with that because, yeah, sometimes when I tell people I'm a twin, it surprises them. I write about science for a general audience as a living. That's what I do. I'm a science writer. And yeah, I grew up in India. I am Indian. I grew up in India. Like many Indian people, probably grew up in a very loving household, but there was a lot of pressure to succeed, a lot of pressure to reach all the milestones, right? To get married, to have kids, to settle down, all of those things. I grew up in a culture that very much people don't really stray from that sort of conventional path. But I've also experienced a lot of loss along the way that kind of changed a lot of that trajectory. So I've learned a lot about love and family and losing people and illness and stuff like that has really shaped a lot of my anxious attachment, really. And even though a lot of that does come from childhood, a lot of my current relationship anxiety comes from the fear of losing people. But yeah, I would describe myself as a high achiever. I hold myself to a really high standard. I was a good student, and I went on to get a PhD in neuroscience, decided that was not my path to stay in academia, and writing for getting science out there to the public was more my calling. So that's where I am now. But I love what I do. I care about the people in my life. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, I found out recently, and we've been working together for a while,
Yeah.
that your degree was in neuroscience, and also, like, not surprised, super wicked smart. And I just have to say, too, one of the things that I've loved about working with you, and I just feel so honored as far as being in, I guess, like, the digital space, is that I don't really see other women of color, at least in my niche. And I'm just so glad to find a reflection like you that had a very similar upbringing, Southeastern Asian under like way of life. And it really does, like, it's like a trifecta, right? Parents who are maybe a little unstable, unpredictable, lovingly, and also the high achieving. To me, it's a really, man, powerful
Yeah.
combo to create the things that we have experienced, and especially with anxious attachment. So, one thing before we get a little deeper, and I want to give everybody in the audience an idea of what we're about to do, is one thing that I love about my process and I really think differentiates me from other coaches is I really love numbers. I love data. Karuna, tell me how important data is in the
Yeah.
scientific standpoint.
It's so important. I mean, you can't. I mean, this is how you have come up with a hypothesis, and I mean that hypothesis is baseless unless you're able to prove it with numbers. Yeah.
Prove it with frickin' numbers. So, we're going to do that today. And one thing that I do when all my one on one clients start is we do an onboarding intake. And essentially, what that means is that you self report. I don't mess with the numbers. I don't have to, because the obvious change in your self reported numbers when you start compared to when you're completing is it's just drastic. We're going to do a little drum roll reveal about how much, Karuna, you've actually changed, like the actual percentage increase of your self-reported numbers of how you feel, and very what seems like esoteric things like your confidence
Mm.
in how you communicate, how you overthink, your own self trust. Because I think it's easy, and you could agree or tell me what you think, but when you first started, did that all feel very confusing and
But yeah.
out there? Yeah, tell me.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, even now, sometimes the word self trust, I'm like, what does that mean? But I have a much more solid. I can wrap my head around that concept now much more solidly than I was when I started. I think the concept of self trust, the concept of thinking about, um, what my needs are past. I would like him to get me flowers. Like what is at the core of that? That's okay. That's a need, sure. Is that a need really? I mean, like, just getting really solid and articulate, being able to articulate to myself what I'm actually looking for in a relationship. And it's interesting because when I started online dating, I had gotten together with a couple of friends who were helping me put my profile together, and just to kind of make it a little more fun, because it can be a little daunting, like setting up a profile and like delving into that world. I made us little cards that we could write our, for any Parks and Rec fans out there, Tom Haverford's, like, oh no, no, no's, like, basically like red flags, green flags. And it was interesting, after starting coaching and looking back at some of those things, did ring true to me. They were sort of core needs. But looking back, I think a lot of them, some of them also shifted with time and shifted with learning more about myself, learning more about what it is to actually be in relationship with someone. Like, a person is not a one-dimensional card.
Yes.
And learning that was very critical. So yeah, like being able to articulate those things to myself, and sort of like, within the dynamics of being in a relationship, that has been, yeah, that has brought a lot of clarity.
Yeah. And I think also one thing that will show them today, like actually the percent increase of your confidence and your self trust and overthinking, like, and how you actually feel in relationship. And I think that's definitely one of the harder things where we feelings can feel just either a lot or nothing or somewhere in between, and it's hard to get a grasp around them. And I'm even feeling from you, and I obviously work with you, so I know how you feel, but I think it's gonna be cool to show them the actual increase. But before
Mm.
we do that, let's get real, Karuna. When you first signed up, and in fact, let's even take it like a little bit before then, made you say, okay, I need to get a handle on this. I like this Claire girl. She seems cute and fun and like a good coach. I'm just kidding. I am a good coach, not kidding about that. But where were you with your overthinking, your anxiety, how you actually felt that made you look for someone?
Yeah. I mean, it was all encompassing. And I think, it was a very new feeling for me. I couldn't really understand like what was happening. Like, I've been with my partner now for 2 years, and it was probably like 6 months in that I first started to experience like, oh, this is weird. Like, I remember it was like over Thanksgiving or something, and I didn't hear back from him. We were texting. He was at home for Thanksgiving. You know, I had already sort of we had sort of started to learn each other's communication styles. I tend to respond very quickly. He tends to take his time to respond. And especially when he's on vacation, it can sort of be, you know, he can't really physically just and mentally just does not have the bandwidth to respond to texts. But that not hearing from somebody in a timely manner, that there was like it was the weekend of Thanksgiving and I hadn't heard from him in like a day and I was a wreck. I mean, it was so and I couldn't understand it. I was like, I we had just hung out before he left. Everything was fine. Like there was nothing to indicate to me that anything was wrong, but I remember I was taking a shower and just like crying in the shower,
Mm.
being like, he's gonna break up with me. And I like don't know, like I had no reason to think that. I also had, you know, I knew this person for 6 months. I mean, you know, again, like 6 months is, you know, it's getting there, sure. Like things were going well. But at the end of the day, it's still 6 months. In the grand scheme of things, it's still 6 months. You know, we're like, you know, we're gonna continue to learn about each other over months and years and all of those things. And so you know, it was just, I couldn't understand why I was having such a visceral reaction. And I think that was the thing. It was like, I couldn't, because I could be like, okay, let me, like, rationally, I knew that I was fine, like, everything was fine. But viscerally, I could not stop whatever was happening inside of me. And it was like, it was alarming. It was like, because I couldn't understand it. And I was seeing a therapist at the time, and I remember talking to her about it, and she was like, you're experiencing anxiety. And I was like, oh, but like, why? Like I don't know why, you know. And so I think once I started, and I didn't know anything about like attachment styles and things like that before I started dating, and I started learning about it more a little bit in therapy. And but I think um, uh, even in a therapeutic setting, it wasn't, I don't know how else to describe it, as like I wasn't getting like the practical tools to deal with it. It was like, okay, I would come there and I would process the anxiety a little bit, but inevitably when something like this happened again, when the anxiety would bubble up again, I didn't, I was just sort of stuck in this cycle of like, something like this would happen. I would go into this like spiral, I would overthink, and it would just become, you know, it got to the point where I wasn't enjoying myself in my relationship. And that was like really disheartening to me because I really liked this person, you know. Um, I couldn't, it made it so hard to see past all of the self doubt, all of the, you know, I was just like picking away at his flaws, picking away at my flaws, and to the point where I just wasn't, on the surface, I remember I was fine. And then I think there was like one day where we were spending some time together and like the facade just broke. Like I couldn't hold it together anymore. And he was like, "What's going on? Like what's happening?" And I was kind of honest with him. I was like, I kind of told him about like experiencing anxiety, you know, with respect to the relationship and anxious attachment and stuff. And it was the first time that I told him, I was like, sometimes I don't know if it's like, because he was like, "Is it something that I did?" And I was like, "Honestly, sometimes I don't know if it's something you did or like the anxiety, or the anxiety. Like I can't separate the two sometimes." But that was the first time that I kind of got honest with him about,
Yeah.
you know, feeling that. But it was sort of at that point that I was like, oh, I need to do something about this
Yeah.
because it's like debilitating. And I had been, you know, saving Instagram post after Instagram post about anxious attachment. And I think at some point I came across your account. And I think what for me differentiated some of your content from some of the others was like looking inwards and taking accountability. I think it was some of the, especially because my partner has avoidant tendencies, a lot of the other content kind of, you know, pitted those two attachment styles against each other in a way that was like, you know, not blaming the avoidant for what's happening, but sort of like, and then it also made me think like, so our relationship is just doomed because I'm anxious and he's avoidant. And
Yeah.
I think like learning that you had gone through something similar with your partner, I think that gave me a lot of hope because it was like, oh, like it's possible for two people to work through those things together. And I think that's sort of what drew me to your um,
Yeah. Absolutely. And just to say this too, before we get into the numbers, but two things that you mentioned, because I kind of forgot, it's been a while, but
Yeah.
the Thanksgiving time, like, would you say that anytime he would travel, you would travel, or but that's actual distance, right? Like
Mm.
he's literally leaving proximity, or you were interpreting distance. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like I think it brought up a lot of just feeling like I was like something awful was going to happen. Like in that interim, in that physical space, something awful was going to happen. And some of that is informed by like the loss I've experienced, but I think some of it hit at like some abandonment wound inside of me that was like, but it felt so overwhelming. Like it felt incredibly overwhelming and scary. Like it felt really scary.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and would you say that would affect work,
Yeah.
going and having fun?
I mean, I just couldn't. And and that's kind of when I realized too that there was like another trip that he took, and I kind of just filled my day with things, thinking that I was like, yeah, like I'm fine. But I was really just trying to keep myself busy and distract my brain so that and I remember because I met with a friend and I was telling her, like, yeah, he's on this trip and I haven't really heard from him. And it's a little, I was learning about relationship anxiety and I was like, yeah, I'm really feeling a little anxious. And she was like, but you're still enjoying yourself, right? And I was like, that's not like when it starts to veer into like, oh, I'm like, and it's not about it's not like I was unhappy with him. It was more that the anxiety was just taking over everything.
Right. Taking over
So,
your life, literally, so
yeah.
much. The other thing that I think you can speak so well to, with your neuroscience degree, I wish I had known that sooner because I would just like poke that at you all the time. I think that's so freaking cool. But obviously, logical mind,
Yeah.
a science-based mind. What was it like for you to know Sean is a wonderful person,
Yeah.
right? What did Sean do for you recently that was like super duper sweet and you narrowly dodged the self-sabotage?
Well, it's kind of like a gift that keeps giving, but for Valentine's Day last year, in response to sort of like an offhand comment that I made about like, we should do more things. And he was like, we went on like 5 trips. Like, what are you talking about? But he heard that, and for Valentine's Day, he created 100, went to ChatGPT and asked for like 100 date ideas, and then he cut them up into little pieces of paper and put them in a jar, and so now we have like a jar of date ideas. And so this a couple of weekends ago, he was like, we should pick a thing from the date night jar. And so I picked one out and it said, set up a candlelit dinner at home. And so I took care of like the candlelit part, but he cooked the entire meal. He made like steak and scallops. And yeah, it was really good. And it was really romantic. And I think we both surprised each other, like, because he was like, candlelit. He was like, I'm just gonna buy like one candle, and I was like, no, like we gotta make it like
Yeah.
pretty. And so I had set everything up, and he walked into the room, and he was like, oh my god, like what? And
Yeah.
I was like, also, he put so much effort into the dinner too, and it was a really nice night. Yeah,
So he came up with some ideas,
yeah,
suggested it first, delivered.
yeah,
I mean, we'll talk more about Sean, but what I think the flex for you is actually learning to receive that and not be
yeah,
the one driving and pushing and making him and forcing him, right? So, the other thing that I want you to talk about, going back to your science brain,
yeah,
neuroscience brain. But tell me what it was like for you to know Sean's actually a really awesome partner and to know that there's no reason to doubt him, to second guess him, but at the same time having visceral I mean, I'll just speak for myself and I want you to hear you, but like it just felt out of control. Like
hmm,
my mind was like a runaway truck or train. It just could not stop. And it would get so bad for me that I'd like say something happened on Tuesday night, whatever. And Wednesday, I'd feel like a hangover. It was
hmm,
it was so intense. Takes 10 hours to do 2 hours of work. It just not worth anything. Life is hard. So tell me about your own mental jujitsu around your logical mind and what you know now around like what was really driving this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was very disarming. And to your point, it felt like I had no control. And for somebody who craves control, it was very frightening. It was very like unnerving. It was very, very frustrating to not be able to, like, I felt trapped by my own thoughts. Like, I felt like, and I think that actually might have been the turning point where it was like wanting to feel like I'm not like some victim, you know, like I'm not a victim to my thoughts. Like I have control here. Like I have agency, like I have, you know, I wanted I think that was sort of like the turning point for me. And I think like learning through, you know, your content and others' contents, like, oh, there are tools to manage this. Like I may not be able to ever, you know, like there are anxious patterns that are, and that was the other part, was learning that like, oh, this goes like deep. Like these are like deep patterns that, you know, I'm not going to unlearn magically in like a few minutes.
A thousand social media posts later,
Yeah,
you're not going to really know the deep core and
yeah,
understand it.
yeah. So I think like, yeah, it felt, but it was very disheartening. Like it felt very, I felt powerless. I think I felt powerless to my thoughts and to the patterns because it felt like I couldn't overcome them.
Yeah, for sure. So let's look at some of your journey. When we started working together, and I just also want to say this, like a lot of my clients are either currently in therapy or have a long therapy background or they shift. And I really consider coaching is a bridge,
Mhm.
meaning therapy and counseling. I highly recommend. I mean, coaching is not for those that aren't open to that. I think therapy and counseling can definitely set a good basis and foundation. But what do you think was a differentiator from the therapeutic approach, very great, wonderful approach, to the tangible things, the process, the hands on process that we did together to actually look at these core beliefs and patterns?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, I had started to delve into some of the anxious attachment stuff with two different therapists. And I think maybe the difference was that, at least with this particular therapist, you know, she gave me, I think it was like the CBT, like triangle to work on. And like she had given me like a worksheet. And that was like sort of the first like step into understanding like my thought patterns. But it still felt very, esoteric in a way, or almost like theoretical, I guess.
Hmm.
And I think in our sessions, like working through like actual real life scenarios that like had happened or were happening, or, you know, or were going, like I was afraid was going to happen. I think like working through them like in real time. I think this is the other kind of difference, is having access to you on between sessions. I think was also really big, because I think what would happen in therapy sometimes, and what I had to kind of adjust to in coaching too, like, you know, I think my tendency is to come to our space and then just like blah, because that's what I would
Hmm.
do in therapy. And you know, I think that was the difference between therapy and coaching, was having access, or having the ability to communicate, ask you questions in between sessions, or communicate like the anchors, like the wins in between sessions. Like that was also like a differentiator, not only in terms of like holding me accountable, but again, catching those patterns in real time and like processing it, rather than like I want to bring this to clear like in a week or 2 weeks. And then by the time I get there, I'm like in a totally different headspace, and like, you know, don't have, like, can't remember what happened, or like feel differently about it, or who knows what. So
Right.
I think that was like another differentiator, like that more like that hands-on part of it was a big difference for me. Yeah.
Yeah. The actual support, because here's one thing too, it's like you're not dumb.
Mhm.
Neuroscience, PhD, master's, something like that. Yeah. I mean, you're not dumb, right? So this is definitely the thing that differentiates not just me from other coaches, but the actual process of coaching is and especially my method is very tangible, it's very actionable. Like,
Mhm.
how did you feel? And I guess tell us a little bit about how confident you feel about your confidence, about what to do in those moments, or even what to do to not get to a place where you're spiraling or overthinking or doubting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that confidence has improved a lot. And I think, like, all the tools that we kind of go over in session, like, first just starting, like, with the awareness. Like, I think, like, with the ability to name, like, oh, this is what's going on. That was like a huge step for me to be able to make the anxiety seem a little more manageable, because I knew what it was. Like, I knew what the pattern was. I knew, oh, okay, this is like I'm spiraling again. Like, this is what's happening. Whereas before it was just this like amalgamous like smoke monster. Like, I couldn't make sense of it. And so I think that just having, the awareness around um, what triggers it, what it is, and then yeah, like having the tangible tools to, even if it's something as simple as like um, grounding myself in my body, like taking stock of like what's around, like okay, like I'm spiraling, like what can I see, what can I feel, naming things like that was really helpful, and then like um, and then looking for the evidence, like focusing on the facts, like that was another huge tool that helped.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're doing so great not sharing like all the processes, because what I don't want for people is like, oh, I can just, you know what? And I'll just say this too. I would listen to things or watch YouTubes and
Yeah,
really the tools and the knowledge is out there. The
yeah,
power of coaching is you can't squirm away. You know,
yeah.
you can't BS your way out of it. You can't logic your way out of it. And would you say that that was a really powerful thing to like have accountability and have somebody tracking you?
Oh yeah, like, and I think like, I think I've said this multiple times in our sessions, but like just calling me out on my BS and like I think like just cutting through all of the things and being like, oh, you're doing like, I think there was one scenario where I was talking about, I don't know if it was like some type of celebration, and you kind of pointed out to me that I was essentially micromanaging my relationship. And it for we all have egos, it like it hurts sometimes to be like, damn, but it stings because it's true,
Yeah.
and it would always, it would take me like a day to process it and be like, like I would just continue to have these sort of like realizations, like, in session after session, or just from you pointing out the things like that I was doing,
Yeah.
I think it's really easy, especially with anxiety. I think it's very easy to, because it's so visceral, and because it's such a deeply emotional experience. It is easier to point the finger at the person who is
Mhm.
triggering it, because it's like, oh, like if I were with somebody else, like if I were with a more secure person, like I wouldn't feel this way. And that's a lot easier to, and I've definitely felt that at times, and that's easier than looking inwards and then trying to understand, like, why am I feeling like this, why
Totally.
am
Well,
I,
and I
and
think
then why is my behaving that way.
totally. Sorry, I didn't hear you finish there. But one thing that I will also say about you, and which is I would say about any of my one on one clients, my role is to bring you truth. I'm not really there for a vent session. I'm here for your highest version, your truest version, your most authentic version. And I'll be honest, not everybody's cut out for that. Straight up. One thing that I will yell at the top of the mountains, and I will yell about you to the top of the mountains, is that not only were you wanting and desiring truth and authenticity for yourself, for your partner, and you had even mentioned before, like even if it wasn't Sean, you wanted this work for you.
Mm,
And it's not for the weak, because
yeah,
hearing the truth, telling yourself the truth, because it's actually not about me. You know that. This is about your truth and what is true for you, and facing maybe what you've been lying to yourself about or explaining away to yourself. Anything you want to add to that around just that dynamic between the two of us and how it changed for you?
yeah. I mean, I think maybe another differentiator between therapy and coaching. Like, I think I have enjoyed working with all my therapists, but sometimes it is about, I don't know, like it is about looking at the other side, right? Looking at, well, okay, well, he could be doing this, right? Like maybe it is something, I think I'm not going to generalize across therapy because, again, therapy has been very beneficial for me. But yeah, I think like and it is kind of a muscle because I think like, it is also, it's like I was saying, like it's easier to point the finger at somebody else, and then it's hard to learn that you might be contributing to this dynamic.
Right.
You well, shit. And it's not about doing. I think the other thing that I've learned from our work is that it's Sean's not wrong, I'm not wrong. Like nobody's wrong. Like we're just two humans who have like history and context and like all of these things that we're bringing now to a relationship. So yeah. So it was like learning, like, oh, okay, like these are things that I'm doing to contribute to this, like that, and then to not take that necessarily um, personally, but then okay, like seeing that as an opportunity to grow.
Totally. I love that. So time is flying, and I want to make sure that we look at and do a reveal because, again, one of the things we've done is have you do an onboarding, an intake, and have where you're at now. And you actually haven't seen your numbers and how much they've really increased. And so let's just do a little reveal here. So, one of the ways that we look at how you've improved is your confidence. So, when you initially start, you rate your confidence. Well, Karuna started at a 4 and you recently reported at a 7. What's that increase there?
Damn, 77%. Am I reading that right? 75.
75% increase.
Wow.
And actually, that number is over here too. So let's just ask this, Karuna. What would a 75% increase be in your salary? Would that be life changing?
Oh my god. I would like, I don't know, move into a mansion or something.
I know it would be so crazy, right? Like the 75% increase. And like, what would you say? Like, okay, looking at that number of a 75% increase, but what do you have on that?
I mean, it is really amazing to see that in the numbers, and then to also feel that, like embody that, and to actually say like, yeah, I do feel more confident in myself and confident in my ability to manage this anxiety.
For sure.
It's
For
very
sure.
encouraging.
Absolutely. And so the next column that we look at is your mindset, like how much you've grown in your mindset. And essentially that's also self-trust to me.
Mm.
So from a 4 to a 7, what's that percent increase there?
Yeah, 75 again. Yeah.
75 again, baby. And what would you say about your own mindset and your self-trust? Like that's the number, but what would you say around the actual feeling that you have and the increase in your self-trust?
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing where that's like manifested is, if something just being uh like holding my thoughts in high regard, if that makes sense. Like trusting myself enough to, if there is something that's popping up, to pay attention to it and to listen to it without judgment, and to really ask myself what's going on. And then if something is, and then to be able to separate that from the noise of anxiety and like, oh, okay, this is something that I actually care about, like that this is a core belief that I
Yeah.
have.
Absolutely. And the last thing that we measure is your overthinking. I That question can also be around like communication around your partner and also your own communication with yourself because that's what overthinking really is. So you started at a 3, now you're at a 7, and what's that per increase? 33? Wow. Again, what would a 133% increase be like in your salary?
I mean,
That's
I'd
like
be
FU
weird.
money, I feel, probably, right? Like
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah, and tell me, so like we see the number of that. If you're on YouTube, you can probably see these actual numbers, but what can you say or add around your own noticing around your overthinking or the change in that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like knowing what triggers it and then knowing that I am in an overthinking spiral and being able to sort of exit out of that spiral a lot faster than I would have been able to in the past. Like to not sort of go down all the way to the point where I would be, where it would feel so powerless. And so now, even though the spirals happen for sure, I'm able to like recognize them for what they are and then be able to sort of ride that wave without getting overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, not taking over your life. I mean, are you getting hangovers from overthinking the next day anymore?
Not
No.
as much. Definitely not as much. They happen every once in a while with big life things, but gosh, when I think of this time last summer and now, it's a big difference.
Huge difference. And, one thing you just said, which I will also say, is that your brain is supposed to look for danger.
Yeah.
I mean, that would just be so weird. I mean, we'd be walking around, I don't know, not safe if we didn't have a protective mechanism. And one thing that overthinking is, it's overactive.
Hmm.
And when we have deep patterns and when we don't have tools, that's where we feel totally out of control. We feel shitty all the time.
Yeah.
But one thing that you said, which I also agree with, it's not about eliminating overthinking. You need critical How
Yeah.
important is critical thinking, Karuna? God,
Very important.
very important.
Very, very
Please
important.
write a article for other people that don't believe in science. Anyway, God. But it is something to look at when we expect overthinking to go away. That's just not really a healthy thing. We
Yeah.
actually need critical thinking. And one thing that we've worked on together is learning how to be proactive with the overthinking so that it doesn't happen. And when inevitably does, because life is triggering, relationships are triggering, they don't do the dishes or leave their underwear on the sink. I don't know. You know how to handle it, right? So let's complete this with what would you tell Karuna that was in a space of spring last year, and she's like, I don't know. This is like an investment in myself, and I just don't know. What would you tell that version of you?
That it's worth it because you're not just doing this. I think this has helped me in so many other ways outside. It's going to help you in other ways outside of your romantic relationship. I think you will become just better at articulating, just for advocating for yourself in different scenarios. And yeah, it will make you a better partner and it will, I want to, at that point in time, I didn't feel like I was showing up to that relationship as my best self. And, I am, this is a work in progress, but I feel a lot better about the way that I'm showing up now compared to where I was before.
Yeah, well
Yeah.
said. And so glad you took the leap. I mean, I don't want to say that it was worth it because I'm not in your body, but I'm gonna guess or give you the opportunity to say, was it worth it?
For sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Karuna, for sharing. I know that your willingness to just be honest, to tell the truth, celebrate yourself is going to make an impact. And if you out there listening have been considering working together in a deep way to really get to the bottom of things and to create long lasting change that not only impact your relationship, but your life. I mean, I would definitely say that's been true for you too, Karuna. I'll put the link in the show notes. There's links everywhere. And I love you all. Love you too, Karuna.
Love you.